Chαίrete and salvete, omnes. Welcome to another video, and today I'm actually going to do my first book review of the year. I'm going to try to do one a month. So the books that I'm going to be reviewing are either going to be fiction books, fiction like fantasy or retelling of myths. I'm also going to delve into some academic books, so it depends on what I have at my disposal at the time. But for today, we are reviewing Outrun the Wind by Elizabeth Tammi. So, for Outrun the Wind, if you don't know what it is a queer retelling of the myth of Atalanta. And as someone who actually didn't know Atalanta's myth that well before I started reading it, I was kind of intrigued by the approach to the mythology and the way that Atalanta's world would have been. The one thing that kind of tripped me up, and this trips me up in most books when this happens, and it's just a personal thing, it doesn't mean I don't like it as a book or anything, but the chapters go between two different characters. And sometimes the chapters aren't always character 1, character 2, character 1, character 2. There's sometimes where it's a new chapter, but it's the same character who last stopped talking. So for a few times I had to go back and double check and to make sure, okay, wait, who was talking again? So it's not a bad thing, but I have trouble following it. I have trouble following books when they do that. So that was my only real annoyance, I guess, with the book. But otherwise, I really liked all the new characters that were written in. It was interesting to see how all of the mythological characters that are present in the original Atalanta myth were characterized in the story, and how they interacted with the created characters. I really liked all of them. I found the plot and the storyline interesting. Of course, they still have the race and the golden apples. Those are still present. But I think it's really interesting how the author went and put her own spin on the things that happen in this book. For me, it actually took me a really long time to finish this book, and it's because of school. So part of it was because I am a slow reader, especially when I have a bunch of other reading to do for school. So it was taking me months and months. This isn't that thick of a book. It's only 295 pages, I think. Yeah, it's only 295 pages. If I didn't have homework and I read at home when I got home, I probably would have finished this book in maybe a week. But because I had homework and everything, this probably took me about 6 months to get completely through. And part of my own problem has nothing to do with the book at all, is I am impatient. I am a very impatient person. I want to know who is the love interest right now. I want to know what is going to happen right now. And because it took me so long to get through the book, at first it felt kind of slow to me, but that's because I'm impatient. It has nothing to do with the pacing of the book. I honestly don't know if the pacing was good or not, because again, it took me so long to read it. I want to read it again when I have time to sit down and reread it without any homework looming over me. So I'm going to reread this, but my initial review is going to be a bit quick, as you can probably tell by the time of this video. But I really liked the characters. I really liked the settings. I don't know how I feel about who ended up being the villain. I always have a kind of feeling about the way villains go in some classical retellings, because it always ends up being someone where I feel like it could have been just someone else, but at the same time, I can understand the angle that the author was coming from. I understand it. I get it. It didn't take away from the story, in my opinion. I thought it was very good. But for me, the way that the villain was written out, there's multiple villains, technically. And there is a narrative in here that I have mentioned before in my Lore Olympus video of rape. And I know that when you read classics stuff, especially things that are retellings or reception type things, it's almost inevitable to come across, but it's so exhausting to me to have to read that, and I understand that there was a reason behind it, and it didn't feel like it was a plot device the same way that Lore Olympus felt. Like, there was another reason, and not another reason. I don't know what I'm saying. It didn't feel like a lot of the plot relied on that particular event, which is why I don't have as much of a problem with it as I did with Lore Olympus. But for me, it's exhausting to continuously hear and read about that. So I really liked the book. I just got kind of tired, and that makes it harder for me to continue through books. So I think that was also part of the reason it took me so long to get through it, because when I had to keep reading about that being mentioned, I kind of wanted to skip over it and figure out what the ending would be without having to worry too much about this random subplot. And I know it was eventually important in a different way, but it wasn't driving the plot, which is a point in my opinion. But otherwise, that was my biggest problem with the book. There's nothing else wrong with it, in my opinion. I found it a lot easier to read than The Song of Achilles. The language is simpler, in my opinion, but not in a bad way. Like, the language felt accessible to me. It wasn't simple as in, like, it felt like a middle grade book or anything. It doesn't feel like it's for a younger audience. It still seems like a young adult book, but it wasn't as hefty in the language, I guess, if that makes sense. So I really do recommend it. So if you haven't read Outrun the Wind and you really like mythology and you're a fan of Atalanta or just badass women from mythology, I highly suggest this book. I think you'll like it. I actually got this sent to me a while ago, and I still am not really sure who sent it to me. It was in an Amazon box and bag, and there was no name, so I'm not entirely certain who did. So if you're watching, thank you. I did finally finish it. I have suspicions of who it is, but I can't be sure. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions or want to hear more opinions that I have on this book, leave a comment below. So that's it for this video, and I will see you in the next one.